In the year 1978, the sleepy town of Millersville, nestled in the heart of Lancaster County, was far from the chaos and terror that would soon descend upon it. On a chilly Friday the 13th in May, the town was bustling with its usual activities. Millersville, known for its historic charm, was a place where everyone knew their neighbors, and the little Susquehanna River meandered through the nearby woods, its gentle waters reflecting the calmness of the town. But little did the townsfolk know that this unassuming day would mark the beginning of a nightmare they could never escape. It all started with a group of rebellious teens, fueled by a sense of mischief and darkness. They had heard whispers of a local legend, the tragic tale of a boy named Jason Voorhees who had drowned in the Little Susquehanna. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the riverbank, the teens gathered by the water's edge. The stories they had heard about Jason's death painted him as a vengeful spirit, lurking in the woods. With wicked grins, they taunted the legend, daring the very darkness they believed to be mythical. One of them, a ringleader of sorts, declared with a sinister edge in his voice, "Let's summon this Jason Voorhees. Let's make sure he knows we don't fear him, that he's just a ghost story." With a sense of trepidation and excitement, they plunged into the cold, murky waters of the Little Susquehanna, taunting an imaginary spirit. But fate had its own plans. As they laughed and splashed in the river, a cruel accident unfolded. Jason Voorhees, the boy who had drowned here years ago, now emerged from the depths of their nightmares. As the moonlight glistened on the water, Jason's lifeless body surfaced, pulled up from the bottom by an unseen force. The teens screamed in terror as they witnessed this surreal resurrection. A curse had been awakened. In that horrifying moment, the town of Millersville would become the setting for a story far more sinister than any legend. The quiet town would soon be plunged into a nightmare from which there was no escape, a tale of darkness, horror, and dread that would grip the hearts of its residents for years to come. What if Jason Voorhees, once a victim of cruelty and a drowning in the Little Susquehanna River, had returned to seek vengeance upon the town of Millersville? The nightmare had only just begun, and the town's darkest hours were still ahead. As the small, lifeless body of Jason Voorhees emerged from the river, it remained eerily silent. Slowly, with every step, it grew in size, transforming from a child into a monstrous figure. The moonlight revealed a hideous, mutilated corpse that bore no resemblance to the boy who had drowned here years ago. His once innocent face had been twisted into a grotesque mask of horror, and his body was now that of an adult, unnaturally grown. The remaining teens, gripped by terror, scrambled out of the river and dashed into the dark woods. Their footsteps were frantic, snapping twigs and rustling leaves as they fled from the abomination they had unwittingly awakened. The forest seemed to close in around them, its ancient trees and gnarled branches forming a labyrinth that twisted in on itself. Only one girl among them, her instincts sharpened by fear, made a different choice. She sprinted towards the town, her heart pounding in her chest as she ran a mile away from the cursed river. Her panicked breaths created clouds in the chilling night air as she reached the first signs of civilization, and her footsteps echoed through the deserted streets. Back at the river's edge, Jason Voorhees, now a towering and soulless monstrosity, emerged from the water. His presence was a chilling specter in the moonlight, a silent harbinger of death. There was no hint of humanity left in those cold, dead eyes, and his grotesque appearance sent shivers down the spine of anyone who gazed upon him. The curse of Millersville, Pennsylvania, had been awakened, and Jason's vengeful spirit, reborn as a relentless and unfeeling force, began to stalk the woods, searching for the terrified teens who had so callously disturbed his eternal slumber. The nightmare had just begun, and the once peaceful town was now shrouded in the darkness of an unimaginable horror. As the eerie sound of "kee kee kee, ma mama" echoed through the woods, Jason's relentless pursuit led him to the first unfortunate teen, the football jock, who had managed to grab his bag of clothes in a desperate attempt to escape. With trembling hands, he struggled to put his boots on, determined not to be caught barefoot in the treacherous terrain. But before he could fully equip himself, Jason's formidable strength overpowered him, dragging him back into the frigid waters of the Little Susquehanna. The surrounding woods were shrouded in a haunting stillness as Jason disappeared beneath the dark surface with the struggling jock. A moment passed, and then the surface of the water rippled as the football jock's clothes were flung back onto the riverbank. The realization dawned that Jason had taken the jock's attire, almost as if he were assimilating the identity of his prey. His new ensemble, a dark and tattered amalgamation of the jock's clothing, added to his menacing presence. The long, stained jeans and the weathered army jacket now draped over his formidable frame, concealing the grotesque scars and wounds that adorned his body. The plain blood-red shirt underneath seemed to symbolize the carnage that had stained his existence, and the old, worn boots completed the eerie transformation. Meanwhile, a distant scream shattered the ominous silence, drawing Jason's attention. The camera panned across the thick woods, revealing a terrified girl from the ill-fated group who had fallen from an unknown cliff face. Her cries for help reverberated through the night, mingling with the rustle of leaves and the distant howls of woodland creatures. The girl's fate seemed to be sealed, lost in the impenetrable darkness of the forest, her panicked voice soon engulfed by the haunting ambience that surrounded the cursed town of Millersville. As Jason's gruesome rampage continued, he approached the fallen girl who had met a brutal and swift end against the unforgiving rock face. Her struggles had been mercifully short, and she now joined the growing list of victims who had fallen to the vengeful entity haunting the town of Millersville. However, the night was far from over, and there were still a few more terrified souls scattered throughout the dark and menacing woods. Jason knew that he would find them, one by one, their screams and pleas echoing through the trees as they desperately tried to escape the relentless force that pursued them. Yet, on the border of the woods, where darkness met the warm glow of streetlights, a glimmer of hope emerged. A young girl, battered and terror-stricken, had managed to escape to the edge of town. Her heart pounded, and her breaths came in ragged gasps as she approached a well-lit street. She practically broke down the door of the nearest house and collapsed inside, overwhelmed by fear and exhaustion. Inside the house, an old woman, her identity for now a mystery, heard the commotion and rushed to the girl's side. With a gentle touch and a comforting presence, she slowly revived the girl. The young survivor's eyes fluttered open, and, for the first time since the nightmare had begun, she found herself in the presence of someone who offered safety and solace. The old lady, whose name remained unknown for the time being, provided a glimmer of hope in the midst of unspeakable darkness. The town of Millersville was gripped by terror, but within the walls of this house, a sanctuary had been found. For now, the young girl was safe, and the horrifying tale of Friday the 13th in Millersville continued to unfold, with Jason Voorhees on a relentless pursuit, and the town's secrets and horrors waiting to be uncovered. In the shadowy depths of the woods, Jason Voorhees closed in on his next victim, the older brother of the jock he had drowned in the river. This young man had managed to get fully dressed, his trembling figure huddled over his bag, tears streaking down his face. Jason, with his heavy and soulless footsteps, crept ever closer, his cold, dead eyes fixed on the prey before him. As he raised his menacing arms, ready to grab the unsuspecting teen and throw him into a nearby tree, a sudden burst of desperate courage and fear overcame the young man. In a split second, he stopped crying and, with a voice filled with terror, let out a bone-chilling scream. In a shocking turn of events, he swung a metal object with all his might, smashing it into Jason's skull. The impact was brutal, knocking the unfeeling monster to the ground. For a brief moment, the relentless force that was Jason Voorhees had been stunned, his grotesque mask concealing his twisted features now tilted awkwardly on his face. A long, dark gash with dried blood marred his visage, a cruel reminder of the young man's desperate, but seemingly successful, defense. The teen didn't hesitate. Driven by fear and adrenaline, he sprinted away from the fallen monstrosity, leaving the object he had used to fend off the vengeful spirit behind. It was only then that the camera panned down to reveal the nature of the metal object. It was a reinforced hockey mask, bearing a set of red and blue chevrons. As Jason, still reeling from the sudden attack, regained his feet and steadied the mask upon his grotesque face, the familiar and unsettling chant, "Ki ki ki, ma ma ma," echoed through the woods. The hockey mask, now ominously adorned, signaled that the terror was far from over. The cursed town of Millersville had not yet escaped the relentless grasp of Jason Voorhees, and his pursuit continued, undeterred and even more malevolent than before. Inside the safety of the house, the young girl, still trembling from the horrors she had witnessed, explained the horrifying attack they had suffered in the woods. Her voice shook as she recounted the relentless pursuit of the vengeful entity known as Jason Voorhees. She described the gory scenes, the fear that had gripped her group of friends, and the relentless brutality with which Jason had struck them down. The older woman listened attentively, her eyes filled with sorrow and a deep, knowing dread. She had heard the stories, the chilling legends that had haunted the town of Millersville for years. As the young survivor spoke, the older woman felt compelled to share her own knowledge about the malevolent force that had terrorized their town. With a heavy heart, the older woman recounted the legend of Jason Voorhees. She spoke of the cursed history, the tragedy that had befallen the Voorhees family, and the relentless and unfeeling monster that had emerged from the depths of the Little Susquehanna River. Every bone-chilling detail was revealed, from the drowning of the young boy to his gruesome transformation into an unstoppable force of darkness. With a somber tone, she admitted that even her own child had fallen victim to the horrifying image they had seen of Jason today. The image, so often dismissed as mere superstition, had now become a brutal reality that threatened the very existence of the town. As she spoke, the sense of impending doom weighed heavy in the room, and the survivors realized that they were facing a terror far beyond their wildest nightmares. The legend of Jason Voorhees had become all too real, and the fate of Millersville hung in the balance as they grappled with the horrors that had been unleashed upon their once peaceful town. In the darkest depths of the woods, the remaining 3 teens had gathered, their panic and fear palpable. They debated the whereabouts of their missing 4th member, completely unaware that she was safe in the house on the edge of town, thanks to the old woman's assistance. Little did they know that their conversation had not gone unnoticed. From the shadows, Jason Voorhees, the embodiment of relentless terror, heard their voices and realized that there was one more victim to claim. With malevolent determination, he rushed forward, his monstrous presence bearing down on them. In the blink of an eye, he brutally slammed his fists through the chests of 2 of the teens, their anguished cries piercing the night. As they collapsed to the ground, their life force ebbing away, they gazed up at the 3rd teen, the one who had escaped Jason's relentless pursuit earlier. Their voices trembled and wavered as they used their final moments to convey a desperate plea. In a dying voice filled with agony, they gasped, "Johnny, run!" The last survivor, Johnny, stood frozen in horror as he witnessed the gruesome end of his friends. He had narrowly escaped Jason once before, and now the relentless force of darkness was closing in on him once again. The chilling realization that he was the last one left, and that the terror of Friday the 13th in Millersville had not yet released its grip, sent shivers down his spine. With their dying words echoing in his ears, Johnny turned and bolted into the woods, a terrified figure running for his life, hunted by the malevolent force that knew no mercy. The cursed night had taken a heavy toll on Millersville, and the horrors that lurked within its depths were far from over. As the tension heightened, the narrative bounced back and forth between the house and the heart-pounding chase in the woods. Inside the house, the woman turned to the young survivor and asked for her name. The girl, still shaken by the horrors she had witnessed, replied with a quiver in her voice, "My name is Kyla." It was a brief moment of connection amidst the chaos that unfolded around them. In the woods, Jason Voorhees, the relentless and malevolent force, continued his pursuit of Johnny. With inhuman strength, he picked up objects of all sizes from the surroundings: bushes, small, barely grown trees, big rocks, even small boulders. He hurled them with frightening force at the running Johnny, the projectiles narrowly missing their mark as he sprinted through the dark and menacing forest. Back in the house, the tension continued to rise. Kyla, realizing the dire situation they were in, uttered, "I must call for help." However, the older woman's response was chilling. She informed Kyla that there was no phone in the house, leaving them isolated and cut off from any potential rescue or aid. The realization that they were on their own, facing a relentless and supernatural threat, cast a pall of despair over the room. The back-and-forth narrative between the house and the relentless chase in the woods intensified the sense of dread and impending doom, as both Kyla and Johnny found themselves in a nightmarish battle for survival against an enemy that appeared to be unstoppable. The horrors of Friday the 13th in Millersville showed no signs of relenting, and the fate of the town's last survivors hung in the balance. The narrative unfolded in rapid succession, switching between the woods and the house as the tension continued to mount. In the woods, Jason had momentarily caught Johnny in his relentless pursuit. His monstrous grip closed around the young man, but Johnny, fueled by a desperate will to survive, jabbed his fingers into Jason's eye sockets. The towering menace bellowed in pain and surprise, losing his hold on Johnny. The young man seized this opportunity and bolted once more, disappearing into the darkness. Meanwhile, back at the house, Kyla, her voice trembling with anxiety, asked if there was a car she could use to escape the relentless terror that had descended upon Millersville. The older woman's response was grim. She explained that she had sold her car some time ago, leaving them without a means of transportation. The narrative then shifted back to the woods, where the pursuit continued. In a twist of fate, Jason stumbled into an old bear trap that lay concealed beneath the forest underbrush. The steel jaws of the trap clamped shut around his leg, holding the relentless force captive for a brief moment. Johnny, seizing this momentary respite, managed to clear the woods, gasping for breath as he temporarily escaped the relentless clutches of Jason Voorhees. As he sprinted down a moonlit street, Johnny's heart pounded with fear, and he could see a well-lit house in the distance. The glowing windows offered a glimmer of hope, and the young survivor knew that he had to reach it, praying that the occupants inside would offer refuge from the nightmare that pursued him through the cursed woods of Millersville. Amidst the growing fear and desperation, Kyla couldn't help but inquire about the older woman's son. Her voice trembled as she asked, "What happened to your boy? Can you tell me more, please?" Before the audience could grasp the details of this chilling revelation, the narrative shifted back to the woods. Jason had caught up to Johnny, and the chase continued, relentlessly, drawing the young man closer to the well-lit house in the distance. Inside the house, a different form of terror was unfolding. The older woman, her face contorted with madness, was now chasing Kyla with a mallet in her hand, her voice twisted with an eerie fervor. She screamed, "Today is his birthday." The oppressive atmosphere of the house, once a sanctuary, had transformed into a nightmarish scene of madness and dread. As Johnny neared the house, the pursuit by the relentless force of Jason pushed him forward, closer to the horrifying revelation that awaited within. The fates of those in the cursed town of Millersville were becoming increasingly intertwined, and the night of Friday the 13th held unimaginable horrors for all involved. Inside the house, Johnny's desperation forced him to break in, his heart pounding as he entered the scene of chaos. But in a strange twist of fate, Jason Voorhees was oddly out of sight for the moment, adding a shroud of uncertainty to the situation. As Johnny entered, he witnessed the nightmarish scene. Kyla was on the brink of being struck by the older woman, who begged for the horrifying blow. Fueled by fear and a desire to protect Kyla, Johnny seized the mallet from the floor and struck the older woman, driving her back with a series of forceful blows. She screamed in anguish and panic, retreating and pleading for her boy. The madness that had overtaken her had reached a fever pitch, and she seemed beyond reason. Suddenly, from above, a menacing figure descended. Jason Voorhees, the relentless and unstoppable force, had found his way into the house from the roof. He pursued Kyla, his presence casting a shadow of terror over the room. Johnny, mallet in hand, knew that he had to act quickly to protect Kyla from the malevolent entity that had been haunting the town. With grim determination, Johnny gave chase, his heart racing as he pursued the terrifying scene that unfolded before him. The mallet became his weapon against the relentless darkness that sought to claim them all, and the horrors of Friday the 13th in Millersville showed no signs of abating. In the midst of the struggle, the older woman tackled Johnny to the ground with surprising force. A brief but intense scuffle ensued as they fought for control of the mallet. It was a desperate clash between survival and madness, with each of them trying to overpower the other. Ultimately, Johnny managed to gain the upper hand and, with a heavy heart, he ended the conflict. As he looked down at the bloodied aftermath of their struggle, his eyes fell upon an old ID that had fallen from the woman's pocket. It was a relic from the 1960s, and the name on the ID sent shockwaves through him. In disbelief, Johnny read the name, his voice quivering with dread as he whispered, "Pamela Voorhees." The revelation was a horrifying twist in the nightmarish tale, linking the older woman to the legendary tragedy of the Voorhees family. The true nature of the terror that had descended upon Millersville was becoming increasingly clear, and Johnny's world had been upended by the revelation of the woman's identity. Outside, the nightmarish pursuit continued. Jason had cornered Kyla in a nearby shed, and the girl, in a desperate bid for survival, barricaded the door, her heart racing with fear. She knew that the relentless force of Jason Voorhees was breaking through the flimsy barrier, and her time was running out. With sheer determination, Kyla grabbed a sharp object from a shelf in the shed and, with all her strength, slammed it into Jason's head. A hatchet struck him, leaving a gruesome axe mark in his head and mask. The impact knocked him back momentarily, but to her horror, Jason began to rise once more, his unstoppable nature undeterred by the devastating blow. Kyla's scream of terror pierced the night as she realized that her desperate attempt to fend off the relentless force had been in vain. Just as hope seemed lost, Johnny, who had been inside the house, walked outside, his mallet still in hand. The chaotic and terrifying scene unfolded before him, and he knew that he had to act quickly to protect Kyla from the malevolent entity that pursued her. As the nightmare of Friday the 13th in Millersville reached a horrifying climax, the fate of the survivors hung in the balance, with the relentless force of Jason Voorhees closing in on them, and the revelation of Pamela Voorhees's identity casting an eerie shadow over the night. The confrontation reached a brutal climax as Jason, undeterred by the grievous wound to his face, pulled the axe free. With a frenzied determination, he lunged toward Johnny, swinging the deadly weapon back and forth. The young man was forced to dodge the relentless attacks, his every move a desperate bid for survival. Inside the shed, Kyla frantically searched for a way to help, her eyes falling upon a machete. She grabbed it, her heart pounding, and with all her strength, she managed to break open the rest of the shed door. As the door swung open, revealing the chaotic struggle outside, she knew she had to act quickly to save Johnny. Jason had Johnny in his merciless grip, choking the life out of him and raising the axe with his other hand, ready to deliver the final blow. The situation seemed dire, and time was running out. With a surge of courage, Kyla rushed forward, swinging the machete at Jason. The blade sliced through the hand he was using to hold the axe. The severed hand and the deadly weapon clattered to the ground, and Johnny was dropped to the earth, gasping for breath. But Jason's relentless nature prevailed. In a swift and merciless move, he grabbed the machete by the blade, his grip unyielding, and yanked it from Kyla's hand. The horrifying confrontation had taken a new turn, and the survivors were left to face the unrelenting terror of Jason Voorhees once more. In the tense and heart-pounding final moments of the encounter, Jason swung the machete left and right, but Kyla managed to evade the deadly blows, sprinting to safety. Jason, undeterred and relentless as ever, prepared to throw the machete with deadly precision. However, Johnny spotted the axe on the ground, a desperate and final means of defense. In a swift and desperate move, he seized the axe and with all his strength, ended the relentless threat. The blow struck Jason, and with a final, agonized gasp, the towering menace collapsed. As the camera panned over the two survivors, they stood amidst the horrors they had witnessed, tears streaming down their faces. Slowly, they began to walk away, the night turning into dawn, a glimmer of hope on the horizon. Soon, the sound of approaching police cars filled the air, their flashing lights piercing the fading darkness. The camera panned down to the spot where Jason would have been, but there was no sign of the relentless force that had haunted Millersville. As the chilling chant of "Ki Ki Ki, Ma Ma Ma" played in the background, the night's horrors were over. The survivors had emerged from the nightmare, and the town of Millersville could begin to heal, knowing that they had faced the darkest of terrors and survived to see a new day.